Picture this. You're standing in a crowded school cafeteria. Hundreds of eyes suddenly focused on you, your pants around your ankles, and three popular kids laughing as they film your humiliation for the entire world to see. Most people would crumble. Most people would transfer schools. Most people would let the bullies win. Maya Chen wasn't most people. What those bullies didn't know was that the quiet girl from California had hands registered as weapons in 3 different martial arts disciplines. What they couldn't have imagined was that their cruel prank would unleash a response so calculated, so devastating, that it would become legendary throughout Riverside High School for years to come. This isn't just another bullying story. This is about what happens when predators pick the wrong prey, when silence transforms into thunder, and when justice arrives wearing size 7 combat boots. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October rain drummed against the windows of the Greyhound, a bus as it pulled into Lakewood, Oregon, carrying Maya Chen toward what felt like the end of the world. At 17, she had already lived in 7 different states, following her father's military assignments like a nomad collecting postcards. But this move felt different. This time, her father wasn't coming with them. Staff Sergeant David Chen was somewhere in Eastern Europe on a classified deployment, leaving Maya and her mother Lisa to navigate this transition alone. The familiar ache of missing him settled in her chest as she watched the pine trees blur. Past the rain-streaked window, Oregon looked nothing like the sun-soaked beaches of San Diego she'd left behind 3 days ago. Next stop, Lakewood Transit Center, the driver announced, his voice cutting through Maya's thoughts. She glanced at her mother, who was frantically scrolling through rental listings on her phone, stress lines etched around her eyes. Lisa Chen had been offered a position at Lakewood General Hospital, a step up in her nursing career that they couldn't afford to refuse, especially with David's deployment pay being their primary income. Maya adjusted her worn black hoodie and touched the small scar above her left eyebrow, a souvenir from her last tournament in San Diego. The mixed martial arts circuit had been her life for the past 4 years, training 6 days a week at Guerrera, Fight Academy under Master Santos, who had taught her that fighting was 90% mental and 10% technique. The mind is your greatest weapon, he would say, but only if you know when to use it. The bus hissed to a stop, and Maya shouldered her military surplus backpack, heavy with everything she owned that mattered. Her competition medals wrapped in her father's old PT shirt, her training journals filled with technique notes, and the leather-bound notebook where she recorded quotes from every martial arts master she'd ever trained under. Her tournament trophies were somewhere in a moving truck that wouldn't arrive for another week. Lakewood felt smaller than San Diego in every way that mattered. The streets were quieter, the buildings lower, and the people moved with the unhurried pace of those who had never lived anywhere else. As they loaded their suitcases into a taxi, Maya noticed how the driver studied her mother's tired face and Asian features with undisguised curiosity. "Riverside High's a good school," he offered as they drove through the modest downtown area. "My daughter graduated from there 2 years ago. Principal Williams runs a tight ship." Maya nodded politely, but her attention was focused on memorizing the layout of her new environment. The streets formed a grid pattern around the school, with the Riverside Recreation Center visible just 3 blocks away. She made a mental note to check if they had a martial arts program. Their new apartment in the Willowbrook complex was a far cry from their spacious base housing in San Diego. The 2-bedroom unit smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and featured the kind of beige walls that seemed designed to drain hope from anyone who stared at them too long. Maya's room faced the parking lot, where she could see rusted cars and overflowing dumpsters through her single window. "It's temporary," her mother said, noticing Maya's expression as they stood in the empty living room. "Once I get established at the hospital and your father comes back, we'll find something better." Lisa's voice carried the forced optimism that Maya had learned to recognize over the years. Military families became experts at making the best of difficult situations. That evening, as her mother worked a double shift at the hospital to prove her dedication during her first week, Maya explored the neighborhood alone. The October air carried the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves, so different from the salt and sunscreen smell of California beaches. She found herself at the Riverside Recreation Center, a brick building that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Through the windows, she could see a small fitness area with outdated equipment and what appeared to be a multi-purpose room with mirrors along one wall. A handwritten sign taped to the glass door advertised women's self-defense classes, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Coach Stone. Maya pulled out her phone and took a picture of the sign. It wasn't the high-tech training facility she was used to, but it might be enough to maintain her conditioning until she could find a proper gym. The next morning, Maya stood in front of Riverside High School, studying the building that would be her academic home for the next 8 months. The school was larger than she'd expected, a sprawling complex of red brick buildings connected by covered walkways. Students streamed through the main entrance, most of them moving in established groups that had clearly been forming since elementary school. Maya had perfected the art of first-day invisibility over the years. She dressed in neutral colors, kept her expression pleasant but not eager, and moved with the confident posture her father had drilled into her since childhood. "Walk like you belong everywhere you go," he told her, "and most people will assume you do." The main office buzzed with typical morning chaos, parents dropping off forgotten lunch money, students picking up late passes, and administrative staff juggling multiple phone calls. Maya waited patiently until a harried secretary could process her enrollment paperwork and hand her a schedule printed on bright yellow paper. Her first class was AP Literature with Mrs. Henderson, located in Building C. Maya had always excelled in English, finding refuge in the analytical nature of literary criticism. Words were weapons too, she'd learned, but they required precision and timing to be effective. As she navigated the hallways, Maya observed the social ecosystem with the tactical awareness her training had developed. Every school had the same basic structure. The athletes clustered near trophy cases, the academic achievers gathered around bulletin boards filled with scholarship opportunities, and the social media influencers posed strategically near large windows with good lighting. It was near her locker that Maya first noticed them. Brittany Walsh commanded attention simply by existing. Tall and blonde, with the kind of effortless beauty that suggested good genetics and expensive skincare, she moved through the hallway like she owned it. Her designer backpack and perfectly coordinated outfit screamed wealth and status. Students stepped aside as she passed, some hoping for acknowledgement, others clearly intimidated. Tyler Brooks walked slightly behind her, his varsity football jacket marking him as athletic royalty. He was the kind of guy who had probably been the tallest kid in every grade since elementary school, using his size to intimidate rather than protect. His eyes moved constantly, scanning for opportunities to demonstrate his dominance. Madison Rivers completed the trinity, her phone constantly in hand as she documented everything for her social media empire. Maya recognized the type immediately. The chronicler who turned cruelty into content, transforming others' pain into her own popularity. They hadn't noticed Maya yet, but she'd noticed them, and her training had taught her to always be aware of potential threats in any new environment. Maya's first few classes passed without incident. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Teachers introduced her with varying levels of enthusiasm, and classmates offered polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. She was used to being the outsider. and she'd learned that forcing connections too quickly usually backfired. Better to observe and adapt than to stumble blindly into social quicksand. It was during lunch that Maya got her first real taste of Riverside High's social dynamics. The cafeteria was arranged like a medieval court, with the popular tables claiming the prime real estate near the windows, while everyone else arranged themselves in descending order of social status. Maya chose a small table near the back, close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid immediate scrutiny. She was quietly eating the sandwich her mother had packed when she heard the commotion 3 tables away. A small girl with curly red hair had accidentally bumped into Tyler Brooks, causing him to spill some of his energy drink on his jersey. The girl, who couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds, was apologizing profusely while Tyler loomed over her like a storm cloud. "Watch where you're going, freshman," he growled, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "This jersey costs more than your entire outfit." Maya watched as Brittany and Madison flanked Tyler, forming a triangle of intimidation around the terrified girl. Other students had stopped eating to watch the show, but none moved to help. This was entertainment to them, or perhaps they were simply grateful not to be the target. "Maybe she should pay for dry cleaning," Madison suggested, her phone already recording the interaction. "I'm sure our followers would love to see how clumsy some people can be." The girl's face flushed crimson as she fumbled in her backpack, probably looking for money she didn't have. Maya felt her jaw clench as she recognized the familiar dance of predator and prey. She'd seen it in every school she'd attended, and she'd learned that institutional bullies operated the same way regardless of geography. Maya's hands remained steady as she continued eating, but her mind was already cataloging information. Tyler's aggressive posture, Brittany's cruel smile, Madison's weaponized phone, the way other students averted their eyes, the complete absence of any adult supervision in this corner of the cafeteria. She thought about her father's voice. "Pick your battles carefully, Maya, but when you do pick one, make sure you're prepared to finish it." Maya wasn't ready to pick this battle yet. She needed more information, more understanding of how power flowed through this place. But she filed everything away, every detail of how these 3 operated, because she had a feeling their paths would cross soon enough. The girl eventually escaped Tyler's orbit, scurrying away without her dignity, but with her safety intact. The show was over, and normal cafeteria noise resumed as if nothing had happened. But Maya continued watching the 3 at their table, noting how they fed off each other's energy, how they scanned the room for their next source of entertainment. Maya Chen had survived 17 years of military life by being adaptable, observant, and prepared. She'd learned from masters who taught her that the best defense was understanding your opponent completely before they even knew you existed. As she packed up her lunch and prepared for her afternoon classes, Maya made herself a promise. She would learn everything about Riverside High School, about its social structures and unwritten rules. She would find her place in this new environment, just as she had in every other place her family had been stationed. What she didn't know yet was that sometimes, no matter how carefully you plan or how well you prepare, the battle chooses you. Begigum. Maya's second day at Riverside High began with an ominous discovery. Her locker, which she'd left organized according to her father's military standards the previous afternoon, had been subtly disturbed. Nothing was missing, but her textbooks were stacked differently, and her combination lock showed faint scratches around the numbers. Someone had been testing her security. She ran through the possibilities as she gathered her materials for first period. Random vandalism was unlikely given the precision of the intrusion. A custodial staff member wouldn't have bothered to restack her books. That left deliberate investigation by someone who wanted to know more about the new girl without revealing their interest. Maya's training had taught her that information warfare often preceded physical confrontation. Someone was gathering intelligence, which meant she'd already attracted attention despite her efforts to remain invisible. The question was whether this attention came from curiosity or something more calculating. Her morning classes proceeded, normally until third period advanced chemistry with Mr. Petrov, a stern Russian immigrant who ran his laboratory like a military operation. Maya appreciated his no-nonsense approach and found herself seated at a lab station near the front, where she could focus without distraction. That focus shattered when Brittany Walsh glided into the classroom 3 minutes after the bell, her entrance choreographed for maximum impact. She wore a cropped sweater that probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe, and her honey blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders in waves that suggested professional styling. "Sorry I'm late, Mr. P," Brittany said with a smile that could have powered the entire school. "Student council meeting ran over." Mr. Petrov barely looked up from his lesson plan, waving her toward an empty seat with the weary resignation of someone who'd learned not to challenge certain students. Maya watched Brittany settle into the lab station directly behind her, accompanied by Madison Rivers, who immediately began arranging her supplies with the kind of precision that suggested obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Madison's auburn hair was pulled back in a ponytail that revealed diamond stud earrings that caught the fluorescent light with every movement of her head. Tyler Brooks occupied the station to Maya's right, his massive frame making the lab stool look like children's furniture. Up close, Maya could see that his confidence masked a certain vacancy in his eyes, the look of someone who'd relied on physical intimidation for so long that he'd never developed other forms of intelligence. Mr. Petrov announced that they would be working in groups of 3 to conduct a titration experiment, and Maya felt her stomach drop as she realized the seating arrangement had trapped her with exactly the people she'd been hoping to avoid. The teachers' group assignments were apparently based on proximity rather than compatibility. "Looks like we're partners," Brittany said, her voice carrying a musical quality that somehow managed to sound both welcoming and threatening. "I'm Brittany, and this is Madison. You must be the new girl everyone's been talking about." Maya turned in her seat, maintaining the neutral expression she'd perfected over years of meeting new people. "Maya Chen, nice to meet you." She kept her voice level and polite, neither eager nor dismissive. Madison looked up from her phone long enough to give Maya a quick assessment, her green eyes cataloging every detail of Maya's appearance with the efficiency of a scanner. "Cute outfit," she said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but cute. "Very minimalist." Maya was wearing dark jeans and a simple grey Henley shirt, clothes chosen for comfort and mobility rather than fashion. She'd learned that drawing attention through clothing choices often backfired in new environments, especially when you weren't sure of the local dress codes and social hierarchies. "Thanks," Maya replied, recognizing the backhanded nature of the compliment, but choosing not to engage. "Should we start on the experiment?" Tyler leaned back in his chair, studying Maya with the kind of intensity usually reserved for opposing quarterbacks. "You're pretty quiet for someone from California. I thought you West Coast girls were supposed to be all chatty and sunshine." There was something in his tone that made Maya's training instincts activate. This wasn't casual conversation, it was probing, testing her reactions to see how she handled pressure. She'd encountered similar tactics from sparring partners who tried to get inside her head before matches. "I guess I'm still adjusting to the climate," Maya said, deflecting with humor while maintaining her guard. "Everything's a lot greener here," Brittany laughed, a sound like wind chimes that somehow managed to feel sharp around the edges. "Oh, you'll get used to the rain. We all do eventually, though some people adapt better than others." The subtext wasn't lost on Maya. This was a warning disguised as welcome wagon friendliness, a way of establishing that adaptation required acceptance of existing power structures. Brittany was letting her know that there were rules to learn and hierarchies to respect. As they began the titration experiment, Maya found herself navigating a complex social minefield while trying to focus on the chemistry. Brittany took charge with the kind of natural authority that suggested years of leadership experience, but her instructions carried undertones of condescension that made Maya's teeth clench. "Maya, why don't you handle the measurements?" Brittany suggested, though it sounded more like a command. "Madison and I will take care of the calculations. We're pretty good at this stuff." Maya recognized the delegation pattern immediately. She was being assigned the grunt work, while the other two maintained control over the intellectual aspects of the experiment. It was a subtle way of establishing pecking order, making her feel useful while keeping her subordinate. "Actually," Maya said, maintaining her calm tone, "I prefer to rotate responsibilities so we all get practice with each step. That way, we're all prepared for the test." Madison's eyebrows rose slightly, and Maya caught a quick glance between her and Brittany. Apparently, suggestions weren't welcome from the new girl, especially suggestions that challenged their established division of labor. "That's sweet," Brittany said, her smile never wavering. "But we've been lab partners since freshman year. We have our system down to a science." She paused, apparently pleased with her own wordplay. "Trust me, this way is much more efficient." Maya found herself at a crossroads. She could push back and risk escalating the tension, or she could comply and risk establishing herself as someone who could be easily managed. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Sometimes tactical retreat is the wisest strategy, but never retreat so far that you can't advance when the time is right." "Sure," Maya said, picking up the graduated cylinder with steady hands. "I'm happy to help however I can." But as she began measuring the solutions, Maya made sure to demonstrate precision that exceeded what was necessary for a high school and chemistry experiment. Her movements were economical and exact, the result of years of training that demanded perfection in every action. If they wanted to relegate her to grunt work, she'd show them what grunt work looked like when performed by someone who understood excellence. Tyler watched her technique with growing interest. "You're pretty steady with those measurements. You do this kind of stuff before?" "My father's military," Maya replied, without looking up from her work. "Precision is kind of a family value." She caught another glance between Brittany and Madison, this one lingering longer. Maya realized she'd revealed more information than she'd intended, giving them insight into her background that they could use to categorize her. Military kids were often viewed as either potential allies or potential threats, depending on the local culture. "That's so cool," Madison said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but cool. "My dad's in banking, way less exciting than the military." Brittany leaned forward slightly, her interest apparently piqued. "What branch? And where were you stationed before here?" Maya recognized interrogation techniques when she encountered them, even when they were wrapped in teenage girl curiosity. These weren't casual questions. They were intelligence gathering, designed to build a profile of the new student and identify potential vulnerabilities or advantages. "Army," Maya said, keeping her answers brief. "We were in San Diego before this." "San Diego's amazing," Tyler said, his voice carrying genuine enthusiasm for the first time. "Great beaches, perfect weather. This place must seem pretty boring after all that sunshine." Maya was beginning to understand Tyler's role in their dynamic. While Brittany wielded social authority and Madison controlled information flow, Tyler served as the muscle and the charm offensive. His job was to make targets feel comfortable enough to lower their guard, to reveal information that could be weaponized later. "Different doesn't mean boring," Maya replied. "Every place has its own character. Mr. Petrov's voice cut through their conversation as he announced a 10-minute break for students to clean their stations and record their preliminary results. Maya used the opportunity to step away from the group, ostensibly to rinse glassware at the sink, but really to create some physical distance and observe their behavior when they thought she wasn't paying attention. From across the room, she watched Brittany and Madison huddled together in intense conversation, their voices too low to overhear, but their body language suggesting serious strategizing. Tyler remained at their station, but his attention kept drifting toward Maya, studying her movements with the kind of focus usually reserved for game film. Maya had encountered territorial behavior before in her various schools, but this felt different, more organized, more deliberate. Most teenage social hierarchies operated on instinct and emotion, but these three moved with the kind of coordination that suggested experience and planning. When she returned to their station, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Brittany's smile seemed brighter, Madison's attention more focused, and Tyler's posture more relaxed. They'd reached some kind of decision during her absence, though Maya couldn't determine what that decision might be. "So, Maya," Brittany said as they resumed their experiment, "are you planning to join any clubs or sports? We're always looking for fresh talent in various activities." The question sounded innocent enough, but Maya recognized it as another probe. They wanted to know where she might fit into the school's ecosystem, which activities might put her in their sphere of influence or competition. "I'm still getting a feel for what's available," Maya said, which was truthful without being revealing. "I'll probably check out a few different things before deciding." Madison looked up from her phone, where she'd been typing rapidly during the entire conversation. "There's a great self-defense class at the rec center if you're into that kind of thing. Coach Stone runs it. She's pretty intense." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Madison's comment seemed too specific, too targeted to be coincidental. They'd somehow learned about her interest in the self-defense classes, which meant they'd been gathering information about her activities outside school. "That sounds interesting," Maya replied, keeping her voice neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. "I might check it out sometime." Tyler grinned, and for the first time, his expression seemed genuinely predatory. "You should be careful walking around alone, especially at night. Lakewood's pretty safe, but you never know what kind of trouble a new girl might stumble into." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. They were letting her know that they were aware of her movements, her routines, her vulnerabilities. The message was clear. They could reach her anywhere, anytime, if they chose to. Maya's training kicked in automatically, her mind shifting into tactical assessment mode. They'd revealed their intelligence-gathering capabilities, which meant they considered her enough of a potential threat to warrant surveillance. That was actually useful information, even if it was disturbing. The bell rang, ending the chemistry period and their uncomfortable dance of verbal sparring. As students began packing their materials, Brittany stood up and placed a perfectly manicured hand on Maya's shoulder. "It was so nice getting to know you, Maya," she said, her grip just a little too firm, lasting just a little too long. "I have a feeling we're going to be great friends." Maya met her gaze directly, letting her see that the implied threat had been received and understood. "I'm sure we'll see each other around." As she walked away from the lab station, Maya could feel their eyes following her, evaluating her reaction, cataloging her responses for future reference. She'd passed some kind of test today, though she wasn't sure whether she'd passed it successfully or failed it spectacularly. Either way, the preliminary skirmish was over. Maya Chen had officially attracted the attention of Riverside High School's apex predators, and she suspected that her careful plans for a quiet, invisible senior year had just become completely impossible. The real question now was whether she was being recruited or being marked for elimination. Maya's third day at Riverside High began with a lesson in psychological warfare that would have impressed her father's special forces friends. She discovered it the moment she opened her locker before first period, a folded piece of pink paper that definitely hadn't been there the night before, tucked carefully between her calculus textbook and her spiral notebook. The note itself was a masterpiece of plausible deniability, written in elegant cursive that probably belonged to Brittany. It contained nothing overtly threatening, nothing that could be taken to school administration as evidence of harassment. Instead, it was crafted with the surgical precision of someone who understood exactly how to inflict maximum psychological damage while maintaining complete innocence. Welcome to Riverside High. Hope you're settling in well. Just wanted to let you know that we love meeting new students and helping them find their place in our community. Some people adapt quickly to our school culture, while others sometimes struggle with the transition. If you ever need guidance on how things work around here, please don't hesitate to ask. We're always happy to help newcomers understand our traditions and expectations. XOXO, your new friends. Maya read the note twice, appreciating the craftsmanship even as she recognized the threat. Every sentence could be interpreted as genuine welcome, but the cumulative effect was unmistakably menacing. The references to adaptation and struggle, the emphasis on understanding traditions and expectations, the implication that guidance was not optional, but necessary for survival. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her backpack. If this escalated to the point where she needed evidence, documentation would be crucial. Her father had taught her that successful military operations required meticulous record-keeping, and she suspected this situation would demand similar attention to detail. The morning passed without incident until third period gym class, where Maya encountered her first real test of how far Riverside High's administration would go to maintain social order. Coach Patricia Martinez was a compact woman in her 50s who carried herself with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades dealing with teenage drama and bureaucratic nonsense. Maya had been looking forward to gym class, hoping that physical activity might provide some relief from the mental chess match she'd been playing since arriving at school. She'd packed her usual workout gear, plain black athletic shorts, a grey tank top, and the worn running shoes that had carried her through countless training sessions. The locker room buzzed with the usual pre-class energy as students changed clothes and complained about whatever unit they were currently suffering through. Maya found an empty corner and began changing, keeping her movements efficient and unremarkable. That's when Madison Rivers emerged from the opposite corner, flanked by two other girls Maya hadn't met yet. Madison wore designer athletic wear that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments, her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that seemed engineered for maximum bounce during physical activity. "Oh my God, Maya!" Madison exclaimed, her voice carrying enough volume to ensure half the locker room could hear. "I love your minimalist approach to athletic fashion, so refreshingly authentic." Maya recognized the verbal jab immediately. Madison was drawing attention to Maya's obviously budget-conscious clothing choices while disguising the attack as a compliment. It was a technique designed to make Maya feel self-conscious while making Madison appear friendly and inclusive to any observers. "Thanks," Maya replied simply, continuing to tie her shoes without looking up. She'd learned that the best response to passive aggression was often no response at all. "I was just telling Jessica and Amber about our chemistry lab yesterday," Madison continued, gesturing to her companions. "You're so lucky to have gotten paired with us for your first group project. We really know how to show new students the ropes." Jessica, a tall brunette with the lean build of a distance runner, studied Maya with undisguised curiosity. "Madison says you're from California. That must be such a huge adjustment, coming from somewhere so glamorous to little old Lakewood." Amber nodded sympathetically, her blonde curls bouncing with the movement. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to start over in a place where you don't know anyone or understand how things work. Maya finished tying her shoes and stood up, recognizing the coordinated nature of this encounter. These weren't random comments from well-meaning classmates. This was a planned operation designed to reinforce yesterday's message about adaptation and belonging. "Every place has its learning curve," Maya said, maintaining her calm tone while mentally cataloging each girl's body language and positioning. "I'm sure I'll figure it out." Madison's smile never wavered, but something shifted in her green eyes. "Oh, I'm sure you will. You seem like a really smart girl, smart enough to recognize good advice when you hear it." Coach Martinez's whistle echoed through the locker room, cutting short whatever response Maya might have made. Students began filing out toward the gymnasium, and Maya found herself surrounded by Madison's group as they moved through the doorway. The gym was set up for volleyball, with nets stretched across both halves of the basketball court and students gathering in loose clusters around each court. Coach Martinez stood at center court with a clipboard, dividing the class into teams with the kind of arbitrary efficiency that characterized most high school physical education. "All right, people, listen up," Coach Martinez called out. "We're starting a new volleyball unit today. I'm going to count off by fours, and that's your team for the next 2 weeks. No switching, no complaining, no drama." Maya found herself assigned to Team 3, along with Madison, a quiet boy named Kevin, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and 2 girls she didn't recognize. The composition felt suspiciously convenient, though Maya couldn't be sure whether it was deliberate manipulation or simply bad luck. Their first opponents were Team 1, which included Brittany Walsh and Tyler Brooks. Maya watched them warm up, noting Tyler's obvious athletic ability and Brittany's surprising competence at a sport that required actual physical effort rather than just social positioning. The game began with Madison serving, her form technically correct, but lacking the power that came from serious athletic training. Maya positioned herself in the back row, content to observe the dynamics before revealing her own capabilities. That strategy lasted exactly 3 serves. Tyler spiked the ball with enough force to knock Kevin backward, then grinned across the net with the kind of satisfaction that suggested this was less about volleyball and more about establishing dominance. "Sorry about that, buddy. Guess you weren't ready." Kevin scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and frustration. Maya could see the familiar signs of someone who'd been targeted before, someone who'd learned to expect humiliation from athletic activities. "Nice spike," Madison called out, though her tone suggested she found Tyler's display of dominance more amusing than impressive. "Kevin, maybe you should pay more attention to where the ball's going." Maya felt something shift inside her chest, a familiar warmth that preceded every fight she'd ever won. This wasn't about volleyball anymore. It was about power and humiliation, about strong people victimizing weak people for entertainment. When the ball came to Maya on the next serve, she set it with textbook precision, sending it high and slow toward the front row where one of her anonymous teammates could attempt to spike. The girl missed completely, but Maya's form had been flawless, and several people noticed. "Nice set, Maya," Coach Martinez called out, making a note on her clipboard. "Good technique." Tyler's expression shifted slightly, registering the fact that the new girl might be more athletic than her quiet demeanor suggested. Maya caught him exchanging a glance with Brittany, some unspoken communication passing between them. The game continued for another 10 minutes, with Maya deliberately keeping her performance slightly above average, but not exceptional. She wanted to see what they would do with the knowledge that she possessed genuine athletic ability, how they would adjust their tactics accordingly. She got her answer when Tyler rotated to the front row and began targeting his spikes directly at Maya. Not at Kevin, who would have been the logical choice for intimidation, but at Maya herself. The message was clear. They'd identified her as the potential threat on the team, and they intended to test her resolve. Maya received the first spike cleanly, sending a perfect pass to Madison at the front row. The second spike came harder and more precisely placed, forcing Maya to dive to make the save. She managed to keep the ball in play, but Tyler's satisfied grin suggested he'd seen what he wanted to see. The third spike was different. Tyler put his full power behind it, sending the ball directly at Maya's face with enough velocity to cause real damage if it connected. Most high school students would have flinched, ducked, or simply hoped for the best. Maya's training took over without conscious thought. She shifted her weight to her back foot, angled her platform perfectly, and absorbed the spike's energy with a technique that would have impressed her old coaches in San Diego. The ball popped up in a perfect arc, hanging in the air long enough for Madison to set up another teammate for an easy kill. The gymnasium fell silent for a moment, students processing what they'd just witnessed. Tyler's expression shifted from confident aggression to something approaching surprise. Even Coach Martinez looked impressed, though she tried to hide it behind her usual stern demeanor. "Outstanding dig, Chen," the coach called out. "That's exactly how you handle a hard spike." Maya felt every eye in the gymnasium focused on her, and she realized that her careful strategy of remaining unremarkable had just been completely abandoned. She'd revealed capabilities that couldn't be explained away as beginner's luck or good timing. Brittany's voice carried across the net, honey-sweet and sharp as a blade. "Wow, Maya, that was amazing. You must have played volleyball before." "A little," Maya replied, which was technically true. She'd played a little volleyball, along with a little basketball, a little soccer, and a lot of mixed martial arts that had given her reflexes most high school athletes could only dream of. Madison rotated to the back row, positioning herself next to Maya as play resumed. "You're full of surprises," she said quietly, her voice carrying undertones that Maya couldn't quite interpret. "I bet there's a lot about you that people don't know yet." Maya kept her eyes on the ball, watching Tyler prepare for another spike. "I imagine that's true for everyone." "Oh, absolutely," Madison agreed. "Some people are very good at hiding their true nature, but eventually everyone shows who they really are." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Madison was letting Maya know that her performance had been noted, catalogued, and filed away for future reference. The quiet new girl, who'd been hoping to fly under the radar, had just painted a target on her own back. Tyler's next spike came with even more force, but this time Maya was ready for it. She moved into position early, planted her feet correctly, and sent the ball back across the net with interest. Not a spike exactly, but a hard, controlled return that forced Tyler to scramble backward to avoid getting hit. The game ended with Maya's team winning by 3 points, though she suspected the score was less important than the information that had been exchanged. She demonstrated capabilities that exceeded normal parameters, and they'd responded by escalating their own tactics. As students began moving back toward the locker rooms, Maya found herself walking alongside Kevin, who still looked shaken from Tyler's earlier display of dominance. "Thanks for those sets," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "Tyler usually just tries to hit the ball through whoever's in the back row." Maya nodded, recognizing the gratitude and the fear in Kevin's voice. "He seems to enjoy intimidating people." "Yeah, well, that's kind of his thing," Kevin replied. "Him and his friends, they like to test new people, see how far they can push before someone pushes back." Maya filed this information away as they entered the locker room. Kevin's warning confirmed what she'd already suspected. This was a deliberate pattern, a systematic approach to establishing dominance over newcomers. As she changed back into her regular clothes, Maya became aware of conversations happening around her, voices carefully modulated to seem casual while ensuring she could overhear every word. "Did you see how she handled those spikes?" One girl was saying, like she'd been playing volleyball for years. "Madison said she's from California," another voice responded. "They probably have way better sports programs there." "I heard her dad's in the military," a third voice added. "Military kids usually know how to take care of themselves." Maya recognized the information warfare for what it was. They were spreading intelligence about her, building a profile that would influence how other students perceived and interacted with her. The narrative being constructed portrayed her as potentially dangerous, someone with skills and background that made her unpredictable. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, Madison appeared beside her locker, moving with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to commanding attention wherever she went. "Great game today," Madison said, her smile bright and seemingly genuine. "You're going to fit right in here at Riverside. I can tell you're the kind of person who understands how to play the game." Maya met her gaze directly, letting her see that the metaphor hadn't been lost. "I've always been a quick learner." "I'm sure you are," Madison replied. "Smart girls usually figure out the rules pretty fast, and the consequences of breaking them." With that parting shot, Madison glided away, leaving Maya alone with the clear understanding that her grace period was officially over. The preliminary assessment phase had ended, and whatever came next would be significantly more direct. Maya walked toward her next class, her mind already shifting into tactical planning mode. She'd revealed capabilities that couldn't be hidden, attracted attention that couldn't be deflected, and entered into a conflict that couldn't be avoided. The only question now was how far they were willing to escalate, and how far she was prepared to go in response. As she turned the corner toward the mathematics building, Maya caught a glimpse of Tyler Brooks leaning against a bank of lockers, his phone pressed to his ear. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and his expression was cold calculation rather than teenage posturing. Maya Chen was no longer just the new girl trying to blend in. She was now officially a person of interest to Riverside High School's most dangerous students, and she had a feeling that gym class had been the least of her worries. The escalation began on Friday morning with surgical precision that would have impressed military strategists. Maya arrived at school to find her usual parking spot occupied by Tyler's massive truck, forcing her to park 3 blocks away and walk through the drizzling Oregon rain. A minor inconvenience that might have been coincidental, except for the fact that Tyler was standing by the school entrance, checking his watch with theatrical precision as she approached. "Running a little late today, Maya?" he called out, loud enough for the cluster of students nearby to hear. "Guess California girls aren't used to our weather patterns yet." Maya recognized the opening gambit immediately. Tyler was establishing witnesses and creating a narrative of incompetence that could be referenced later. She checked her own watch and confirmed what she already knew. She was arriving with 7 minutes to spare before first period, hardly late by any reasonable standard. "Weather's actually pretty nice," Maya replied evenly, shaking the rain from her jacket. "Reminds me of winter mornings at Camp Pendleton." Tyler's expression flickered with something that might have been respect or might have been annoyance. Maya's casual reference to the Marine base sent a clear message about her background, while avoiding any appearance of bragging or intimidation. The real test came during lunch period, when Maya discovered that psychological warfare had evolved into something more sophisticated and coordinated. She'd brought her usual sandwich and book, planning to eat quietly while reviewing notes for her afternoon history exam. The cafeteria buzzed with its normal Friday energy, students already mentally transitioning into weekend mode. Maya chose a small table near the windows, positioning herself where she could observe the room while maintaining some privacy for studying. She'd barely opened her textbook when Jessica and Amber approached, carrying trays that suggested they'd made a special trip from their usual table near the center of the cafeteria. "Maya, perfect timing," Jessica said, settling into the chair across from her without invitation. "We were just talking about how hard it must be to make friends in a new school, especially in the middle of the semester." Amber nodded sympathetically as she claimed the chair to Maya's left, effectively boxing her into the corner. "It's so brave of you to sit by yourself like this. Most new students would be desperate to find a group to hang out with." Maya recognized the tactical positioning immediately. They'd trapped her in a corner where escape would require obvious rudeness, while their body language suggested a friendly conversation to any casual observers. Meanwhile, their words carried subtle digs about her social isolation, disguised as concern and admiration. "I appreciate the thought," Maya said, closing her textbook but keeping her finger marked at the page. "But I actually prefer quiet time to study." "Oh, you're so dedicated," Jessica replied, her tone suggesting that dedication was somehow quaint or naive. "But you know what they say about all work and no play. It's important to have balance in your life." Amber leaned forward conspiratorially, lowering her voice just enough to create intimacy while ensuring Maya could hear every word. "Speaking of balance, we heard you absolutely destroyed Tyler in volleyball yesterday. Madison said it was incredible to watch." Maya felt her internal alarms activate. The conversation was moving toward dangerous territory, probing for information about her athletic background and capabilities. "It was just volleyball," she said carefully. "Lucky timing on a few plays." "Lucky timing," Jessica repeated, as if testing the phrase for authenticity. "That's so modest of you. Though I guess when you've had professional training, high school sports probably seem pretty basic." The comment was a fishing expedition designed to see if Maya would correct their assumptions or reveal additional information about her background. Maya kept her expression neutral while her mind raced through possible responses. "I wouldn't call it professional training," Maya said, which was technically accurate. Her martial arts instruction had been intensive and expensive, but it hadn't been oriented toward professional competition. Amber's eyes lit up with apparent excitement. "But you did have formal training, right? Madison mentioned you move like someone who really knows what they're doing." Maya realized she was being maneuvered into either lying outright or confirming suspicions about her combat training. Either choice would create problems. Lies could be exposed later, while truth would escalate their perception of her as a threat. "I've taken some self-defense classes," Maya admitted, choosing partial honesty. "My dad thinks it's important for girls to know how to protect themselves." Jessica and Amber exchanged a look that confirmed Maya's suspicions about the coordinated nature of this interrogation. They'd gotten the information they came for, and now they were preparing to shift tactics. "That's so smart," Amber said, with enthusiasm that sounded manufactured. "Especially since you're walking home alone through some pretty isolated areas. Lakewood's generally safe, but you never know what kind of weirdos might be hanging around after dark." The threat was delivered with the same synthetic concern they'd been using throughout the conversation, but Maya heard it clearly. They knew her route home, her schedule, her vulnerabilities. They were letting her know that her movements were being monitored and that her safety was contingent on their continued goodwill. "I'm pretty careful about my surroundings," Maya replied, meeting Amber's gaze directly. "Situational awareness was one of the first things I learned." Jessica smiled brightly, apparently delighted by Maya's response. "That's so practical. Though sometimes being too aware can make a person paranoid, it's important to trust the right people and not see threats where none exist." Maya understood the subtext perfectly. They were warning her not to interpret their surveillance and subtle intimidation as actual threats, while simultaneously demonstrating that they possessed both the capability and willingness to escalate if necessary. The conversation was interrupted by Madison's arrival, her timing so Perfect that Maya suspected she'd been watching from across the cafeteria, waiting for the optimal moment to intervene. "There you are," Madison exclaimed, sliding into the remaining chair with fluid grace. "I was looking everywhere for you guys. Maya, I'm so glad you're getting to know Jessica and Amber better. They're absolutely the sweetest." Maya found herself surrounded by three young women who radiated the kind of predatory friendliness that nature documentaries associated with pack hunters. Their smiles were perfectly calibrated, their posture relaxed but alert, their conversation flowing with the practiced ease of people who'd performed this routine many times before. "We were just talking about Maya's self-defense training," Amber said, apparently eager to share the intelligence they'd gathered. "Isn't that fascinating?" Madison's green eyes sharpened with interest, though her expression remained pleasant and welcoming. "Really? What kind of self-defense? Like karate or something more modern?" Maya realized she was being pushed toward revealing specific information about her martial arts background, details that could be used to assess her actual threat level. "Mixed styles," she said vaguely. "Whatever seemed practical." "That's so cool," Madison replied, though her tone suggested she found it more concerning than cool. "I bet you could really handle yourself if someone tried to mess with you." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, loaded with implications that Maya couldn't ignore. Madison was testing her response to hypothetical aggression, gauging whether Maya would back down from conflict or escalate toward confrontation. "I'd rather avoid situations where that's necessary," Maya said, choosing de-escalation while maintaining dignity. "Violence should always be a last resort." Jessica nodded approvingly, as if Maya had passed some kind of test. "That's such a mature attitude. Some people get a little training and suddenly think they're invincible, you know? They start looking for excuses to show off their skills." Maya recognized the trap immediately. Jessica was creating a false dichotomy where Maya could either be mature and passive or immature and aggressive. Any future use of her skills could now be framed as showing off or looking for trouble. "Confidence and wisdom are different things," Maya replied, drawing on her father's military philosophy. "Real strength comes from knowing when not to use your capabilities." Madison's smile widened, and for a moment it seemed almost genuine. "You're going to fit in perfectly here, Maya. I can tell you understand how things work." The phrase carried multiple layers of meaning. On the surface, it sounded like acceptance and welcome. Underneath, it was confirmation that Maya had successfully navigated their test and demonstrated appropriate submission to the existing power structure. As the lunch period wound down, the three girls began gathering their belongings with the synchronized efficiency of a drill team. Maya remained seated, ostensibly finishing her sandwich, but actually processing the intelligence gathering session she'd just endured. "We should definitely hang out more," Amber said as they prepared to leave. "Maybe this weekend, there's always something fun happening around town." Maya recognized the invitation as another form of surveillance, an opportunity for them to observe her in less structured environments. "I'll probably be pretty busy this weekend," she said, "still getting settled and catching up on schoolwork." "Of course," Madison replied, her understanding tone not quite masking her disappointment. "But don't become too much of a hermit. Social connections are really important for feeling at home in a new place." After they left, Maya sat alone for the remaining 10 minutes of lunch period, her mind cataloging everything she'd learned from the encounter. They were operating with military-level coordination and intelligence gathering, using multiple assets to probe for weaknesses while maintaining plausible deniability about their intentions. More importantly, they'd confirmed that her background and capabilities were now known quantities. The element of surprise that might have protected her was gone, replaced by the more dangerous dynamic of acknowledged mutual awareness. Maya's afternoon classes passed without incident, but she remained alert for signs of continued surveillance or escalation. It came during her walk home from school, when she noticed Tyler's truck following her at a distance of about 2 blocks. Not close enough to be obviously threatening, but near enough to send a clear message about her vulnerability. She tested the tale by taking a detour through the small downtown area, stopping at a coffee shop and browsing in a bookstore for 20 minutes. When she emerged, the truck was gone, but she spotted Madison's car parked across the street, its occupant apparently absorbed in her phone. Maya walked home by a circuitous route, using storefront windows and reflective surfaces to monitor for additional surveillance while appearing to window shop casually. By the time she reached her apartment complex, she'd identified at least 3 different vehicles that had appeared too frequently to be coincidental. The message was unmistakable. They wanted her to know she was being watched, that her movements were predictable, that her safety existed at their discretion. It was psychological warfare designed to create a sense of helplessness and isolation. That evening, Maya sat at her desk reviewing the day's events while working through her weekend training routine of stretches and conditioning exercises. Her small bedroom didn't provide enough space for full martial arts practice, but she could maintain flexibility and muscle memory with basic movements. As she moved through a series of defensive postures, Maya's mind shifted into strategic planning mode. The preliminary skirmishing was clearly over. They'd established her capabilities and her responses to various forms of pressure. The next phase would likely involve more direct confrontation, designed to force her into situations where she'd have to choose between submission and resistance. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her mother, who was working another double shift at the hospital. "How was school today, sweetheart? Making any friends yet?" Maya stared at the message for a long moment, considering her options. She could tell her mother about the harassment and surveillance, but that would only add stress to an already difficult situation. Lisa Chen had enough problems adjusting to her new job without worrying about high school social dynamics. "Schools. Fine," Maya typed back. "Still learning my way around, but the teachers seem good." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. Maya justified the deception as protecting her mother from unnecessary worry about problems. That Maya should be able to handle herself. As she prepared for bed, Maya reviewed her tactical options for the coming week. She could continue trying to de-escalate and avoid confrontation, but that strategy was clearly failing. Her attempts at diplomacy were being interpreted as weakness, encouraging further testing rather than reducing tensions. Alternatively, she could demonstrate enough strength to discourage further harassment, but that approach carried significant risks. Any display of her actual combat capabilities would likely be seen as an unacceptable challenge to the existing power structure, potentially triggering a response that could spiral beyond her ability to control. Maya settled on a middle path. She would maintain her current posture while preparing for escalation. She'd document everything, build evidence of the harassment pattern, and position herself to respond appropriately when the situation inevitably deteriorated. As she turned off her bedroom light, Maya caught a glimpse of headlights in the parking lot below. A dark sedan sat idling near the entrance to her apartment complex, its occupants invisible behind tinted windows. She watched for several minutes, but the car remained stationary, its engine running. Maya closed her curtains and double-checked her door lock, adding a chair wedged under the handle for additional security. She'd learned to take threats seriously, regardless of their source or apparent sophistication level. The psychological warfare phase was clearly ending, and Maya suspected that whatever came next would test not just her fighting skills, but her judgment about when and how to use them. Outside her window, the sedan's engine continued running, a subtle reminder that she was being watched, even in what should have been the safety of her own home. Monday morning brought the moment Maya had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. She arrived at school to find a crowd gathered around the main entrance, students clustered together with the electric energy that always accompanied major drama. As she approached, Maya caught fragments of conversation that made her stomach clench with anticipation. "Did you see what they posted?" One girl was saying to her friend, phone screen tilted between them. "It's already got like 300 likes," another voice responded. "This is going to be everywhere by lunch." Maya's instincts screamed danger, but she forced herself to walk calmly through the crowd, keeping her expression neutral as she headed toward her locker. Whatever had happened, reacting visibly would only make the situation worse. She discovered the nature of the attack when she reached her locker and found Zoe Martinez standing nearby, holding her phone with trembling hands. Zoe was a quiet sophomore. Maya had noticed in the hallways someone who seemed to navigate high school by making herself as invisible as possible. "Maya," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible above the morning chaos, "I think you should see this." The phone screen showed Madison's Instagram account, where a video had been posted with the caption, "New girl thinks she's tough. Reality. Check coming soon." The footage appeared to have been taken during Friday's volleyball game, edited to make Maya's defensive plays look aggressive and confrontational. Strategic cuts made it appear as though she'd been targeting other players, while commentary dubbed over the original audio suggested she'd been trash-talking and showing off. Maya watched herself spike the ball back at Tyler, but the editing made it look like an unprovoked attack rather than a defensive response. The video had been crafted with professional-level skill, transforming legitimate athletic performance into evidence of aggression and poor sportsmanship. "There's more," Zoe said reluctantly, swiping to show additional posts across multiple social media platforms. Screenshots of text conversations where anonymous students described Maya as dangerous and looking for trouble. Photos taken from a distance showing her walking home alone, captioned with speculation about what kind of person avoided making friends. The campaign was comprehensive and devastating, designed to isolate Maya socially while painting her as the aggressor in any future conflicts. By the time she'd seen everything, Maya understood that they'd moved far beyond high school bullying into something approaching character assassination. "Who showed you this?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Madison sent it to me directly," Zoe admitted, her face flushing with embarrassment. "She said I should be careful around you, that you'd already threatened some people and might target me next." Maya felt the familiar warmth building in her chest, the precursor to the combat mindset that had carried her through countless tournaments. But this wasn't a tournament with rules and referees. This was psychological warfare with no boundaries and no oversight. "Zoe," Maya said carefully, "has anyone ever bothered you before this? Before I arrived at school?" Zoe's eyes widened, and Maya saw the recognition dawn across her features. "You think they're lying about you the same way they lied about other people?" "What do you think?" Maya replied, letting Zoe reach her own conclusions rather than directly accusing anyone. The first bell rang, and students began filtering toward their classrooms. Maya walked with Zoe toward the freshman hallway, using the time to gather more intelligence about the social dynamics she'd stumbled into. "There was this girl last year, Rachel," Zoe said quietly as they walked. "Madison posted videos of her crying in the bathroom, said she was unstable and dangerous. Rachel ended up transferring schools." Maya filed this information away, recognizing the pattern of systematic character destruction that had probably been repeated multiple times. She was just the latest target in an ongoing campaign of social terrorism. The morning passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Maya could feel the weight of manufactured notoriety following her through the hallways as students who'd never noticed her before suddenly found reasons to stare. The edited video had created a narrative that was already taking on a life of its own. By lunchtime, the story had evolved beyond recognition. Maya overheard students claiming she'd attacked multiple people during gym class, that she'd threatened teachers, that she'd been expelled from her previous school for violence. Each retelling added new details, transforming her from unknown newcomer to dangerous troublemaker. Maya chose to eat lunch in the library, hoping to avoid the cafeteria's social minefield while she planned her response. But the harassment followed her there, delivered through a carefully orchestrated encounter that demonstrated just how sophisticated her opponents had become. She was sitting alone at a corner table, trying to focus on her AP history homework, when Tyler Brooks approached with theatrical concern etched across his features. He moved slowly and deliberately, ensuring that nearby students could witness his apparent attempt at peacekeeping. "Hey, Maya," he said, his voice carrying just the right note of reasonable authority. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened in gym class last week." Maya looked up from her textbook, recognizing the performance for what it was. Tyler was creating witnesses and establishing a narrative where he was the reasonable party, trying to resolve conflict peacefully. "What about it?" Maya asked, keeping her voice level despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. "Look, I know you're probably feeling defensive about being new and everything," Tyler continued, his tone suggesting patience and understanding. "But the way you came after me during volleyball was pretty intense. Some people are starting to worry about what might happen if you really lose your temper." The accusation was brilliant in its simplicity. Tyler was reframing her defensive, player's aggressive behavior while positioning himself as the concerned victim, trying to prevent future violence. Anyone overhearing the conversation would hear a reasonable young man trying to diffuse tensions with someone who apparently had anger management issues. "I don't remember coming after anyone," Maya replied carefully. "I remember playing volleyball." Tyler's expression shifted to one of disappointed understanding, as if Maya's response confirmed his worst fears. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't even realize how aggressive you were being. That's what makes this situation so concerning." Maya realized she was trapped in a rhetorical maze where any response could be used against her. Denying aggression made her seem delusional, while acknowledging Tyler's interpretation would validate his false narrative. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Patterson, the school librarian, who approached their table with the harried expression of someone dealing with repeated disruptions. "Is everything all right here?" Mrs. Patterson asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected it wasn't. "Everything's fine," Tyler replied with the kind of respectful politeness that adults always found reassuring. "I was just trying to clear up a misunderstanding from last week." Mrs. Patterson's attention focused on Maya, clearly identifying her as the potential source of trouble. "Miss Chen, is there anything you need to discuss with me or another staff member?" Maya understood the subtext immediately. Mrs. Patterson was offering her an opportunity to report the harassment, but doing so would validate Tyler's narrative about her being unable to handle normal social interactions. It was another no-win scenario designed to force her into a position of weakness. "No, thank you," Maya replied. "I was just trying to study." Tyler nodded approvingly, as if Maya's response demonstrated exactly the kind of poor judgment he'd been concerned about. "I'll let you get back to your homework, but Maya, if you ever want to talk about managing stress or anger, I'm here to help." After Tyler left, Maya sat alone with the growing realization that she was facing opponents who understood psychological warfare at a level that exceeded most adult capabilities. They weren't just bullying her, they were systematically destroying her reputation and social standing while maintaining complete plausible deniability. The final period of the day brought the confrontation Maya had been expecting since Friday afternoon. She was walking toward the student parking lot when she found her path blocked by Brittany, Madison, and Tyler, positioned in a loose semicircle that looked casual to distant observers, but felt unmistakably threatening up close. "Maya!" Brittany called out with artificial enthusiasm. "Perfect timing. We wanted to talk to you about the video situation." Maya stopped walking, recognizing that running would be interpreted as admission of guilt, while advancing might be seen as aggression. She was trapped in physical space just as effectively as she'd been trapped in rhetorical space all day. "What about it?" Maya asked, though she already knew where this conversation was heading. Madison stepped forward, her phone held prominently in her hand. "We're concerned about how people are reacting to the footage. Some of the comments are getting pretty harsh, and we don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about you." The offer of help was obviously another trap, but Maya needed to hear the specific terms before she could formulate a response. "What kind of wrong idea?" "Well," Brittany said with apparent reluctance, "some people are saying you might be dangerous, that maybe you came here because you got in trouble at your old school." Tyler nodded gravely, playing his role as the concerned athlete. "We know that's probably not true, but rumors like that can really hurt someone's reputation, especially when there's video evidence that might be misinterpreted." Maya realized they were offering her a deal: submit to their authority, and they might consider moderating the social media campaign against her. It was extortion disguised as friendship, control disguised as concern. "I appreciate your concern," Maya said carefully, "but I'm not really worried about rumors." Madison's smile sharpened, and Maya caught a glimpse of the predator lurking beneath the helpful facade. "That's so brave of you, though sometimes being too proud can make a bad situation worse." "What situation?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. Brittany exchanged a meaningful glance with her companions before responding. "Well, there's going to be a big party this Friday night at Jessica's house. Most of the senior class will be there, and it would be a great opportunity for you to show everyone that you're not the person they think you are." Maya understood immediately. They were setting up a public confrontation in an uncontrolled environment where they could orchestrate her humiliation without adult supervision or institutional oversight. "I'll think about it," Maya said, which was the closest she could come to declining without explicitly refusing their invitation. Tyler's expression hardened slightly, the first crack in his reasonable persona. "You really should come. It would mean a lot to everyone if you made an effort to be part of the community." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Attendance wasn't optional. It was a summons to judgment. Maya was expected to present herself for whatever they had planned, and refusing would be interpreted as confirmation of everything they'd been saying about her. "Like I said, I'll think about it," Maya repeated, stepping around them toward the parking lot. As she walked away, Maya heard Madison's voice carrying clearly across the distance. "I really hope she makes the right choice. It would be such a shame if people got the wrong impression about her." That evening, Maya sat in her bedroom, reviewing everything that had happened while working through her conditioning routine. The social media campaign had been devastatingly effective, transforming her from unknown newcomer to pariah in less than 24 hours. The party invitation was clearly the next phase of their campaign, designed to force a public confrontation that would justify whatever escalation they had planned. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Don't go to that party. I heard them talking about what they're planning to do." Maya stared at the message for a long moment, realizing that she'd reached the decision point she'd been dreading since arriving at Riverside High School. She could continue trying to de-escalate and avoid confrontation, but that strategy had clearly failed. Her opponents had moved beyond testing into active persecution, and retreat was no longer a viable option. Alternatively, she could attend the party and face whatever they had planned, using her training to survive the encounter and hopefully demonstrate enough strength to discourage future harassment. But that approach carried enormous risks, both legal and personal. Maya typed back to Zoe, "What kind of plans?" The response came quickly. "They're going to try to pants you in front of everyone and film it. They want to completely destroy you." Maya deleted the text thread and turned off her phone, her mind shifting into the focused calm that preceded every important fight she'd ever faced. The choice was no longer between confrontation and avoidance. It was between submission and resistance, between accepting victim status and claiming her right to defend herself. Maya Chen had spent 17 years learning how to adapt to new environments, how to read people and situations, how to choose her battles carefully. But she'd also spent 4 years learning how to fight, how to turn defense into offense, how to end threats before they could escalate beyond control. Friday night was still 4 days away, which gave her time to prepare for whatever they had planned. Maya smiled grimly as she began planning her own surprise for Riverside High School's apex predators. They wanted to see what the quiet girl from California was really capable of. Maya decided it was time to show them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.